right, let's talk wide receivers. Guy you're higher on, Amari Cooper. He's at Atlanta. You got him at 17. The experts have him all the way down at 22.
I feel really good about him, and I know I came into the year lower on him. I was worried about Brissett, but this seems to me like it's that rare instance that a worse QB is actually good for the receiver, at least the number one receiver, because they just lock in and give their guy the ball. And that's what's happening here. 10 and 11 targets in back-to-back weeks. He said after week one, it was a complete dud for Cooper, and he watched the film and was like, this guy's open way more than I realized. I need to feed him, and we've clearly seen that come into fruition. He's the wide receiver 10 and wide receiver 4 over his last 2 weeks, back-to-back 100-yard and touchdown days. Atlanta's given up the 5th most points to wide receivers. I think that, like I mentioned with Mariota as my quarterback, Hail Mary, sneaky, sloppy shootout potential for this game. I'm surprised at how low the experts are, given how well Cooper's been, and none of it feels unsustainable right now.
I'm a little surprised too. I mean, we faded the Browns like crazy, but I mean, I've seen what I've seen. I mean, he's getting a lot of targets. He's catching a lot of balls. Brissett's not great, but
I gotta give it up.
He's not the worst guy in the league. He's not the worst though, and I thought he might be the worst. He was so bad for Miami. I really thought he might be the worst guy out there, but I'm definitely wrong. He's at least competent. In the running game, both guys startable easily. Nick Chubb, number one running back in fantasy.
Yeah, Stefanski's got to get credit there. I mean, the guy has really coached up a brilliant scheme for Brissett, accentuating his strengths, minimizing his weaknesses, and it's really made Cooper and, as you mentioned, Chubb thrive in fantasy so far.
Kareem Hunt's been great too.
Yeah.
For at least pretty good. Chris Olave going against Minnesota, wide receiver 26, 6 spots higher than the experts. Yeah, I mean, he really might be a coming force, huh?
Absolutely. And this ranking factors in that MT could be playing. I still think that's how good Olave is. If MT's out, shoot him up even higher. Back-to-back 13 target days, 150 more air yards than the next closest guy. Back-to-back weeks leading the NFL in air yards. The guy is just getting an insane usage role. Last week, we saw it to start to come to fruition with 147 yards and 9 catches. Still hasn't even found the end zone, and he's been dominating at that level. 33% and 34% target share, 62% and 40% air yard share across the last 2 weeks. And now he gets a Minnesota team that's just not very good at all. I think that 23 fantasy point week last week is a sign of the things to come for the rest of the season, looking like a league winner in that round 9 to 10 range. I think the best is yet, as I just mentioned. The best Saints receiver the rest of the year. I think he's better than Mike Thomas from here on out. I love Chris Olave.
Man, I don't know how I feel about this next one. You got Brandon Aiyuk going against the Rams. You like him at 30, 5 spots above the experts. I like Aiyuk a lot, but you saw that Broncos 49ers game, right? And I mean, I believe he scored a touchdown in that game.
He did.
But I mean, it was one of the worst. Sometimes you're just like, oh, it's a defensive struggle. Sometimes it's like, wow, both these offenses are so fucking bad that there's no way anybody could do anything. I mean, like that was like one of the worst quarterback duels ever that I've seen.
That duel would be
right.
I mean, like firecrackers, like chucking those little fucking duds at each other's feet.
It was like a pillow fight.
Exactly. And nothing more than a pillow fight. I do think the Rams are a significantly worse defense than the Broncos. I think the Broncos are a genuine.
The Broncos do have a good defense. I'll give them
I think the 49ers do too. I think both teams have very good defenses. So that's what I'm banking on, because the Rams have given up the second most points to wide receivers. Similar mold of receiver, Marquise Brown, 17 targets, 14 catches last week. I know that offense is a faster pace, more pass happy. I get all that. But Aiyuk, we've seen a wide receiver put up at least 20 fantasy points against this Rams defense. Is it going to be Debo? Yeah, probably it's Debo. But 8 targets in back-to-back weeks have led the team. I don't know. Something about it. It's kind of more of a gut call. But in terms of matchup, in terms of the style of play, I just think this is an Aiyuk blow-up week. I think he gets deep. We get a lot of questions about Aiyuk. So I wanted to toss him on here.
All right. Speaking of Marquise Brown, you got him leading your lower list going against Carolina. You got him at 26. The experts like him all the way up at 17.
Yeah. I'd rather have Marquise Brown than Aiyuk. Like, I don't want my lower to say, I don't want to play this guy. I do. He's just being ranked as like a almost top 12 guy, and deservedly so. Again, 17 targets, 14 catches, 21 fantasy points at half PPR. That's insane. But just don't forget the first 2 weeks, 12 and 10 fantasy points, wide receiver 26 and wide receiver 38. That's more of what I'm expecting here. Ranking, the big thing here is J.C. Horn, an unreal corner for the Panthers. They've limited the opposing offenses to the fewest receiving TDs allowed to receivers so far this season. And J.C. Horn's been completely locked down. Passer rating when targeting against him is 15.3. Multiple picks. Like, teams just kind of fade him. They just, whoever he's on, they just don't look at anymore. And I'm worried that he's going to shadow Marquise Brown because he's been shadowing teams all year. So despite that big week, he only has one really blow-up game. Two of the others have been meh, and now he gets one of the best lockdown corners in the league on him. A little bit sketchy of ranking him out inside my top 15 as he is right now by the experts.
Rashod Bateman going against Buffalo. You like him at 34. The experts like him a little more, up at 28. I'm with you on this one.
Yeah, he's only running 70% of the routes right now. So is he the number one receiver? Maybe on this team, but you want your number one receiver running 95 to 100% of the routes, not 70%. He's been fully reliant on big play TDs. And I do think more often than not, the way Lamar's playing, big TDs are going to happen each and every week. But I do think the Bills are very good at limiting that. Tyreek Hill, 2 catches for 30 yards. They know how to take out that number one deep threat in an offense. So I'm nervous Bateman gets that same treatment that Tyreek Hill did. So yeah, pretty nervous about him. And just Mooney.
Time to cut Darnell Mooney.
Cut him. Just fucking cut him. I wanted to throw him on there because I somehow am still getting questions about him. The answer is no, you don't play him. In fact, you send him packing. The guy has 27 receiving yards, not on average, on the fucking year. 27 receiving yards. Derrick Henry has 58 receiving yards on the year. He's doubled up Darnell Mooney. This team is averaging 78.3 passing yards per game. It is pathetic. It's abysmal. It's killing Darnell Mooney, who I do think is an okay talent. I am not sitting and waiting on this one anymore. No way. Get rid of the guy.
Couple Hail Marys at the wide receiver position. Zay Jones, you already talked about a little bit at Philly. He's only 29% rostered. And then Richie James Jr., who you brought up earlier in the podcast, going against Chicago, only 12% owned. And then there's Josh Palmer, who I kind of sneaky think Josh Palmer might be a decent play this week. He's at Houston, 27% rostered.
100. If I have to rank them now that Keenan Allen's not practicing, I think Josh Palmer dropped in a lot of rosters because they thought Keenan Allen was back. He'd be my number one streamer, assuming Keenan Allen's out. Dating back to last year when Keenan Allen's been out, he's the wide receiver 16, 17 points, wide receiver 22 with 15 points, wide receiver 32 with 14 points, wide receiver 33 with 11 points, and wide receiver 24 with 13 points. Over his last 5 games without Keenan Allen, I think you can just bank on that top 36 numbers for a guy that's out there in nearly 80% of leagues. So I really like Josh Palmer against a bad Houston team, especially last week. 9 targets, the highest he's ever seen in his NFL career. 99 yards, 6 catches. Feel really good about that role. Think he finds the end zone, sees about 80 yards. Should Keenan Allen miss? And it looks like he is. Now, I also love Zay Jones, only 29% rostered right now. 11 targets last week. Hauled in 10 of them for 85 yards and a score. All training camp was about how these two have a kinetic type of connection, him and Trevor Lawrence. 25%, 13%, and 30% target share across his first 3 weeks. He might miss the game. It didn't practice today, but definitely a Hail Murray, worth taking if this game becomes a shootout. I think it could. And as mentioned, you said Richie James has 4+ catches in every single week. He has 10+ fantasy points in 2 of his 3 weeks so far. He leads the Giants with 14 receptions. We now know no more Sterling Shepard, torn ACL on that awful turf. He was averaging a 29% target share. So Richie James was doing this damage with another target hog beside him. Now there's really nobody else. Kenny Golladay can't catch a fucking ball, and Wan'Dale and Tony aren't practicing. You could see 10, 15 targets go Richie James's way against a bad Chicago team. So I really like him as a play. I did want to shout out, too, as a Hail Mary, Josh Reynolds, 3% rostered. If all those other guys are gone, I do think somebody from the Lions has to step up and carry the load if Amon sits. Josh Reynolds, 11 and 12 fantasy points the last two weeks. If him and Chark are out, Amon and Chark, I think Josh Reynolds could have easily another 12 to 15 fantasy point day with even bigger upside. This guy's made some big plays throughout his NFL career.
That's true.
I like Josh Reynolds a lot.
All right. As far as what we're watching, we already touched on this in the quarterback section. We're talking about the Jets wide receivers. What's going to happen with Zach Wilson there? Is Eli Moore? Can he be redeemed? Romeo Doubs, we also already talked about. We do think we'll both like him kind of to ascend to being Rodgers' number 1. And Rondale Moore, does he play? If so, what's his role? Hopefully not a scarecrow.
What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments. Check out some more videos and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.